When I was very young, when I first started going to Pony Club, I once said to my mother, one day I'm going to represent New Zealand in the Olympic Games. And she just laughed and said, yes, dear. I don't think I'll ever win another Olympic gold medal. I would dearly love to win another badminton. And, of course, the World Championships. It would be great if he could be Olympic champion and world champion, but anything can happen.
I think I was a typical child that begged for a pony from the time I could first speak, and I got my first pony when I was 4. I think probably the best characteristic I have as far as a competitor or as far as my involvement in the horse world is my dedication and my undivided love of horses.
Now just quietly, don't have to rush. Quietly. 1, 2. No, don't rush, don't rush. Just steady.
It certainly wasn't a burning ambition. When I left school, I was going to be a 3-day event rider. It just sort of happened. My grandfather was very keen, and he used to breed polo ponies and hunt a lot. So Mummy was very keen that perhaps her children would like to enjoy the same sort of sport. So I actually hunted when I was 3 years old. The success at the top is the harmony between horse and rider. When I went through a very bad patch without some very, very good horses, I really did think that I was going to sort of give up the ghost. I'd had enough of the sport. I obviously wasn't, here on this earth in order to compete in 3-day eventing. And I thought to myself, well, I'll go and take a secretarial course or learn how to cook or something, which would have been quite useful. To make a top-class 3-day event horse takes confidence. There are very few brave horses born.
To ride successfully at top level, you do have to take certain risks, and there is danger involved in it. At a big competition, you're not really scared. I think you want to do well, but there's so many things that can go wrong. The horse can fall or anything can happen. And so you're really uptight and slightly apprehensive about it. But I think we must all be sort of adrenaline addicts.
Eventing is the ultimate test of all-round horsemanship, of the partnership between horse and rider that comes alive galloping and jumping at speed across country. The 3-day event evolved out of the training of the horse for war. Military requirements of speed, discipline and endurance across country were in peacetime translated into an equestrian triathlon, a 3-part test of horse and rider.
45 of the world's top horsemen, mounted on the finest thoroughbreds, compete at Aldershot Central Stadium for the equestrian crown to mark the closing stages of the 14th Olympiad. High spot in this 3-day riding event is the endurance, speed and cross-country test. With time limits set for each stage of the contest, a careful check is kept by stopwatch. Every 5 seconds over or under the time margins mean a loss of 5 points.
Already popular on the continent, the sport first came to England in 1948, when the Olympic trials were held at Aldershot, in front of an enthusiastic crowd.
The Gigolo, Colonel Jussom's mount, is one of the few who come down. The horse loses a shoe and the rider 60 points. France's number 2, Commandant Emanuele, also comes to grief. His horse, Tourtel, balks an early jump and throws his rider at a second attempt.
The following year, the Duke of Beaufort decided to hold a similar event on his estate at Badminton. Since then, badminton has become synonymous with the sport, and the 3 phases of dressage, cross-country and show jumping attract the largest crowds of any annual equestrian event in the world.
Finally, I know you ride your nasty motorcycles at every other event. You don't ride motorcycles in Badminton Park anywhere. But it's no good you girls flashing your eyelashes at me anymore. It's Vicomte de la Gravière that you've got to tackle. We continue, obviously, to try and look after your creature comfort.
The difficulty in here at Badminton above all others, because everybody wants to ride here, is to try to make the obstacles so that the best will be tested and the best will come out top, but the less good will not get eliminated and be a waste of time them having come.
But I think the whole secret is the trust that is built up between horse and rider, and so important that you should avoid ever getting your horse in trouble.
Some of the fences don't leave you an easy enough option. It's so wide this year that if you have a hiccup at the ditch, your horse is unlucky enough to leave a hind leg or something, and so his momentum is stopped when he gets to the other side or he goes on his knees, you're in real trouble to get up and get out.
That boat thing coming out isn't even square on us, David.
Tom, come here.
It is very important that when you walk your course, you walk it so carefully. You know the slow route, you know the quick route, you make your decision. The only time you change your mind is, for example, if you're riding as an individual at Badminton. Dorothy, my trainer, will have been watching the closed circuit, and she'll say, look, it is a bit of a problem. Number 5 has got rather slippery. I don't think it's worth taking the risk. Why don't you go the slow route? Then you change your mind. But it's the brave guys that at the end of the day are going to be in front, because they have taken, say, 15 to 25 seconds, saving time going the fast route.
I don't like that. Who can go off nothing?
I know, you only trot. Let's have a look.
Long before I ever dreamt of building a course, I was riding myself. I know instinctively what would have worried me if I was in their shoes, and that's what I do.
Colonel Weldon fell heavily on Fingerau at the second fence in the Badminton Senior Stakes. Fortunately, he wasn't injured, though it took him a minute or two, not helped by his impatient horse, to get his breath back. One fall doesn't daunt a rider of the Colonel's caliber, so he remounted.
Badminton has become, over the course of time, the most prestigious, the biggest annual event in the world. And I think that what makes me come is if I have a wonderful horse and he's done a wonderful job, then I say sometime in his life he deserves a Badminton. And if one really wants to prove that he is a wonderful horse and he is capable of the most the sport can ask.
That the police unit by the main scoreboard in the trade stand area.
I think being from a small country like New Zealand, to start with, sort of coming over here as a fairly much an unknown, you just sort of fit in wherever you can. I think the eventing crowd anyway are a very good crowd and are always very friendly and willing to help, and if you're prepared to sort of get on and make the first move, then you very soon become accepted. Certainly I don't feel like a foreigner in England now.
See up there.
The first day's dressage should demonstrate the willing obedience of the horse. But if he is fit enough for the cross-country, he's often too full of energy to concentrate in the dressage arena.
I don't think I would ever become just a dressage rider. There's not quite enough excitement in it for me. But yeah, I do enjoy it. Cross-country has been my forte, if you like. But more recently, I've certainly worked a lot harder on the dressage. Three-day event is very demanding on the horse. they've got to be able to be disciplined and controlled and be sensible to produce a dressage test.
My initial attraction to the sport was the fact that you had to be a little more versatile and a little more adjustable than a rider that specialized just in racing or just in show jumping or just in the dressage. I don't take into consideration the background of the sport with the military. I would have made a horrible soldier, I'm sure. I did go to a military school up until I was 18. And I think they would agree that marching and taking orders all the time wasn't that natural to me.
For the United States Dominican, Bruce Davidson with J. Babu.
Competition is now so intense that a horse must do a good dressage test if he is to have a chance of being amongst the prize winners.
When I first started competing, when I was 16 years old, I thought dressage was so boring. I couldn't imagine why we had to go around in these silly circles with horses' head down on the floor and so on. But then, slowly but surely, I realised that the dressage actually does improve the horse's jumping and indeed its galloping.
You must be more bent round your right leg. Sometimes things are felt by the rider that don't always look quite as good or as bad to somebody else. You had a bit more flow rather than stop-go. I think the most important thing is that you must be a liaison officer between the rider and the horse. I am her coach, but I think I'm her pair of eyes, really.
I'm finding that he won't, when you say look for a bit more bend, he's almost going out on my inside leg rather than staying.
He's not really listening to both aids. You must have him a little bit more in the tunnel, between both legs.
How?
Come along. One of the most important parts of the sport is actually understanding your horse's character. Rather like humans, we're all different. We all have to be treated in a slightly different way. At the end of the day, you're getting to the same end, but you have to actually get there by being, shall we say, a little diplomatic. And if Prices and Nightcap were humans, I would say that Nightcap would have been the likes of, say, Gregory Peck. Very good-looking, tall, dark, charming, quiet, a real one for the birds, but very much a gentleman. Whereas Priceless would be much more sort of, say, the likes of Rambo, big, muscular hunk with sort of tattoos and a real toughie, and therefore would be treated in, again, a completely different way. Rather like Rambo, point a gun at him and he'll fire back. Whereas Nightcap would sort of say, hang on a minute, let's talk about it. Women are fractionally more sensitive towards feelings of the horse.
Women seem to strike up a more natural rapport than the average man. And so I would say it is not only one of the few sports that men and women can compete on what is called an equal basis, but in many cases, I think the woman has a slight advantage that way. What I love about horses is I love all their personalities, and I love patting them on the back and enticing this one to do a little bit more, and giving that one the slap when he needs it and telling him that that's not on, and dealing with the mares and dealing with the stallions and dealing with the so-called level-headed geldings and making them all work as a family and unit.
In some horses you get on and you just know that temperamentally you'd never get on with it. And temperament does come into it.
Go on. Go on.
It has got to be a partnership between the horse and rider.
Good boy.
You've got to trust them to know that they're going to actually jump the fence and do what you ask, and they've got to have enough confidence in you not to question what you're asking them and just to get on and do it.
Good man. Good man.
I definitely look for horses that have reasonably good temperaments and are not difficult to ride because of their temperament.
The rider is about 75% of the combination. Everybody obviously has got to have a horse, and the horse has got to be well trained. But the good rider will make a jump look easy, whereas the not so good will find it terribly difficult.
You can never say walking the course beforehand that this course will cause so many eliminations or so many falls. Until the competition gets underway and a few horses have been round, you can't really tell.
On cross-country day, horse and rider will be working hard for nearly 1.5 hours. After the steeplechase and roads and tracks comes the moment the crowds have been waiting for.
The horse doesn't jump any higher or gallop any faster than he did 100 years ago, but the rider is capable of that improvement. So riders can expect to find things get more difficult every year. They're very often worrying. You think how you're actually going to do it before, and once you've done it, then you wonder what you were worried about. There was no reason for the sport in this country before the last Great War. The young people in those days didn't require any other excuse to risk their necks because we had fox hunting.
I don't consider the sport dangerous if you are a schooled rider and you understand what you're asking yourself to do, and your horse is schooled and he understands what you're asking him to do. That danger element is so greatly diminished. It's probably much more dangerous to get on the motorway and go 100 miles an hour into London on any given day.
Castaway today is one of Britain's most successful and popular horse trials riders. In a sport notorious for the technical and physical demands it makes on the participants, she's shown exceptional skill and courage on her way to the top. She's won at world and European level, and at the 1984 Olympics won bronze and a silver medal. She is Virginia Holgate. Virginia, what kind of a family did you come from?
Well, my father was in the Royal Marines. So we travelled a lot. Cyprus, Canada, Singapore. Mummy, who'd always been brought up with horses ever since she was 3 years old, found it quite difficult, really, to keep going with the horses in places like Singapore, but she managed it.
I look after probably the stable, really, the bedding, ordering the food, discussing what they're going to eat. Dorothy does all the training, and Ginny does the fast work.
Mummy is marvellous. She feeds the horses. I think the feeding of the horses is equally as important as, of course, the fitting work. So I really let her get on with it.
They are started at 6 with a small feed of soaked hay in order to get the digestive juices going, and then at 6:30 they're fed. At about 8 o'clock, the horses that are not going out for their exercise get a small quantity of hay. No horse is allowed to be in the stable without anything to eat for longer than 2 hours. We are very keen on the environment for the horse. All hay, and especially straw, has a great many spores which are not able to be seen with the naked eye and float around in the atmosphere. And they get down into the horse's lungs, and they're one of the things that bung up the works. So we put hay in a bag, and the bag is then soaked for 24 hours because it takes that time for the spore to swell up sufficiently not to go down into the horse's lung. It gets trapped on the way down and to sink in the atmosphere. Our vet does something called a lung function test, which will tell him if all the tiny airways are absolutely clear in the lung or whether they're full of mucus and all sorts of other things.
Is the orange dry, the paint?
The reason why our setup works is that none of us interfere in the other person's job.
Please.
It is very much a close team, but an interesting one, because it's not often that 3 rather strong-willed, strong-minded females can get along together. We all respect each other's little bit of territory, and I think that's really why we all get on so well. We school the novices virtually every day, but never more than about 40 minutes.
Stay out. Good boy.
It is terribly important that they're not bored.
Good boy. It's a good boy.
I can't think that they can enjoy grinding round and round and round in circles. And very often you'll do more harm than good by simply boring them. And I think that is terribly important. The horse must be kept happy and enjoy his work.
Bruce Davidson applies the same principles using a stopwatch. His fitness program is based on interval training.
The ideas behind interval training are extremely simple and basic. The heart is a muscle, and the best way to train muscles, to make them stronger and to make them more durable, is to stress them for a short period and rest them, so that at no point is any muscle pushed to the point that it becomes fatigued. And the heart, being a muscle, then seems to thrive on shorter periods of work than it actually can take.
Bruce has pioneered this method of training since he first won the World Championship in 1974, and most of the top competitors now use the system in some form. Much of the work at his home in Pennsylvania is directed towards finding the right fitness program for each individual horse.
I use the swimming for all kinds of different reasons. One is I think it's important for the horses, if they're going to be real athletes and they're going to be completely fit, to be trained in as many different ways as possible. I think it's important mentally for them as well as physically. If you have a horse in hard training, there are a lot of things where if you can swim them, you can maintain their level of condition, and in many cases you can even improve it. But I mostly put it in just as an additive to their conditioning.
And they got loose. But no, she held on.
It's important to remember why we do have these animals and why we do love them so much, but also to remember that they are fun as well. And there's nothing more fun than to have a J.J. Babu that you can go to the Olympic Games with or go to badminton with and be a real contender, and at the same time do any of the things that just a normal horse would do.
Oh, Nancy's got her boots on. We're going cross country.
I don't think the danger interests me now, and it certainly never did initially. I think the level of agreement and understanding that a rider and a horse achieve is much more interesting to me. And probably if I had been as interested in getting to know people and understanding what makes them tick, I would have been much better as a human doctor or done something else with my life. But what captivates me is horses, and so I give my life to them.
I find that riding 5 or 6 horses a day simply doesn't do the trick as far as fitness is concerned. So I work up to 700 skips a day. It's going to be a big problem training for the World Championships in Australia, mainly because of the flight, the quarantine, boredom. Certainly for prices is a problem, and you don't know how the flight is going to affect the horse. One has no means of telling. So we're slightly going into the unknown.
If, for the walls in your home, a silk finish is a little too shiny,